Good afternoon. Welcome to episode 54 of the Blunt Talk Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Wright, coming to you from the hot, humid, and comfy confines of Atlantic City, New Jersey. Wherever you may be watching or listening, I thank you as always. Like, share, and subscribe. It helps the channel. It's been a very hectic past 6 days for me guys. I hope you guys have been safe and sound wherever you've been at. And between the new job and some of the obligations, responsibilities, and things I had to take care of, very hectic, but glad to be back, sitting at the desk, sitting here talking about sports as always. Blunt talk, y'all know how it is. Hopping right into it. This episode is going to be on Eagles pre-training camp news and notes. Now, as you guys know, today technically was like the first day for guys to start reporting, starting to get ready for camp, guys arriving. So I wanted to touch on some of the stories that were very pertinent to me, that were, stood out more or less, that I felt like definitely need to be discussed going into the rest of training camp or the start of training camp. Nonetheless, I would always tell you guys, check us out on Apple Podcasts, Apple and Spotify is what I meant to say then. But Apple Podcasts and Spotify, check us out on there as well. But nonetheless, hopping right into it. Looking at some of the notes, I was definitely trying to get keen into from some of the, good announcers or commentators or guys who have been around the Eagles so far this spring, and they got a good dose or look at what they've been doing to give us an idea or give me some type of an idea of what I could run off, right? And I took my time, guys. Like y'all know, I hadn't came out with an episode in a couple of days because I wanted to make sure things were right. But I'm glad I got a little tidbit for us for the Bird Gang, right? Brian Baldinger, as y'all know, Eagles former Eagle and NFL commentator on Fox, gave some very poignant takes on the offensive line, and a key take on Mekhi Becton, who was obviously the free agent pickup the Eagles have picked up formerly of the Jets this offseason. Definitely some things I wanted to touch on, so hopping right into it. Brian Baldinger went on a couple of different platforms. This show, I forget the name of the show. I wanted to give him a shout out. I want to say it's the Philly Podcast or Philly Sports Podcast. Correct me if I'm wrong. I will definitely have the description and the link because I want to make sure those guys got their love. Another YouTube channel out there shouting out the Eagles. Want to give them their respect and their props. But nonetheless, they had Brian Baldinger on for an interview, and some key things that I wanted to take away from the notes from his interview that I thought was very poignant. He talked about Trevor Keegan, who was the mid-round pick for the Eagles out of Michigan. He said this guy is a guy that once he gets his feet under him, he's going to be an eventual starter. I had no doubts there too. Trevor Keegan was a mauler at Michigan, downright beast, so not really a shock there. Dylan McMahon, obviously he's not Jason Kelsey, let's get that out the way, but he plays with leverage and can win with leverage, so that's definitely something that we need to check out and keep an eye on. He spoke also a little bit on Cooper DeJean. He basically said that instead of basically having him play multiple positions, he feels like right now maybe the best keen thing for him is to pretty much play the cornerback position to start and then try to branch out and learn other things. I tend to agree with that. It's great that he knows how to play multiple positions, but sometimes when your mind's all over the place, you make a lot of mistakes. It's hard for you to focus in on one thing when you're keying on so many different things. So one thing at a time, let him master his craft, and then you can branch him out in different places. So I tend to agree with Brian Baldinger there. He said that, let him hone his skills, his technique, and then worry about moving around. Again, I agree. But the key thing that he talked about more importantly was more in depth was Mekhi Becton. And this is the point that I wanted to harp on when I talked to you guys. He said that Mekhi Becton has unique power, has been injured a lot. Pretty much, from listening to the interview, he was basically equivocating, is he tough enough? Is he really, his size and his strength say he's tough, but is he really tough? He's dealt with a lot of injuries, inconsistent play, better run blocker than pass blocker. I think that's been well known so far in his career. Possible swing tackle, which is also a good thing. Can play multiple positions. But the thing that Brian Baldinger said that I definitely feel is ultimately correct, he said that if Jeff Stoutland could tap into this guy, he would be a huge pickup for the Eagles. The major issue that was, I think, kind of unknown with him, especially the Jets, that was news to me, he dealt with a lot of immaturity issues. And coming from the Jets, that's not really a shock. I mean, it's kind of hard to be mature in an immature-ass, organization. But nonetheless, he dealt with the maturity issues, something I didn't really know or understand. But hopefully now him being in this organization and being around Jeff Stoutland and being able to hone on his skills, talking to guys like Lane Johnson, talking to guys like Jordan Mailata, talking to guys like, Landon Dickerson, being around Jason Kelsey when he's in the building, getting, picking his brain. The sky's the limit for this guy. So I'm really very hopeful that he can play because, we need him to play well if he does have to get in. But the key is he might be threatening for that right guard position, which was the key caveat for this. Something that Brian Baldinger touched on that I've kind of touched on throughout the offseason about. He said that Mekhi Becton could possibly threaten for the right guard position. He says Tyler Steen is currently technically the right guard. He's obviously been in the system. He has a year in. He played a little bit last year. However, if Mekhi Becton, can really hone that guard position, that might be a threat to Tyler Steen. But I want to make sure that I'm not selling Tyler Steen short because Steen has come in stronger. He has looked bigger. I saw some footage of him today. He definitely does look bigger than what he was a year ago. And that's a testament to Jeff Stoutland and just the way he, builds and breeds offensive linemen. So, interesting takes from Brian Baldinger. Definitely a lot of it was defensive takes. As far as, offensive takes, I'm sorry. Offensive takes as far as, the offensive line and what the guards could possibly look like. But I thought it was very interesting what he said about Cooper DeJean because I agree. I think it's great that he can play multiple positions, but let's see what he can really do at one position first, which is corner, the position he plays, and then let's try to stretch him out from there. Going a bit further, something else I thought that was very interesting, a little caveat that, CSN Philly that was dropped over the weekend. The Eagles aren't quick to overreact to changing their preparation schedule. I think a lot of times people tend to get caught up with, they flamed out so bad at the end of the season, they obviously got to do a bunch of changes. They got to change everything. That's not necessarily true. You keep what works, you get rid of what doesn't work. The Eagles' preparation has not been something that they've needed to really change. I don't know if you really paid attention. They had 2 years ago the Super Bowl season where they didn't really have injuries, and then they got all their starters back. And then by the time the Super Bowl came, most of the starters from week 1 were playing. And then they had a year ago where it was like a little bit of everybody got injured, and then it wasn't really the injuries that derailed them; it was just inconsistent play. So it's one of those things where you gotta really understand that's not something you really have to fuck with. The preparation is there. This team is always prepared. They always have a good game plan. It's about execution at the end of the day. So I tend to agree with Nick Sirianni. There's no need to change that. Speaking of Nick Sirianni, round up this segment, there's 2 topics speaking on Nick Sirianni. First, I want to speak on when Nick Sirianni talked about hiring Kellen Moore, and he stated hiring Kellen Moore he knew was the best thing for us, and he said it was a gut feeling. I agree, because let's be honest, Brian Johnson had the 7th ranked offense in the NFL last year. He had DeAndre Swift playing on a contract season. He had DeAndre Swift behind that offensive line. He clearly knew Jalen was hurt and didn't really do much to adjust the damn game plan. I would be beating a dead horse going over, obviously, 1-5 down the stretch, 1-6 if you count the playoff game. It's a moot point now because we're about to enter a new season. But the point is, nonetheless, the offense was stale and it needed to be changed. You saw 4 vertical routes being called on plays where it was like, okay, they're sending an all-out blitz. How is this working? The play where I'll never forget this, the bubble screen where Devontae Smith injures his ankle against Arizona. Why the fuck are you calling that there? So of course he knew this was the best thing for us. And when he says us, understand Nick Sirianni's not dumb. This had his job attached to it. We cannot be revisionists in history when we say. We can't have revisionist history when we say, what got Doug Peterson fired from Philly? Doug Peterson didn't get fired from Philly because he was a bad coach and he didn't do what was necessary. Doug Peterson got fired from Philly because he didn't want to fire Press Taylor, who was a shitty offensive coordinator and wasn't really qualified for the job. But because he was one of Doug's guys, he kept his job, he kept his position, and be as it may, he was the offensive coordinator. And the offense stunk. That year Carson Wentz got the Eagles to the playoffs, and all his receivers had like 500 yards or less. I think it was the first time in NFL history that was ever done. It was fucking horrible. It's horrible. So yeah, Sirianni's not dumb or not, and we're not naive for him to say, this is the best things for us. Hell yeah, because if you want to keep your job and you want to win a championship, this probably would be the best thing for you. And last but not least, he opened up, which I thought was deep. He opened up about potentially being fired last offseason and kind of said what I thought most guys would say. I didn't really think about it too much, didn't really harp on it, didn't really put too much stock energy into it. I knew things were rough. He said all the typical cliche things. Make no mistake about it. Nick Sirianni's job is on the line this year. I think it's fucked up. My personal opinion. I think Nick Sirianni has done enough to keep his job at this point, but be that as it may, he's got to show and prove like all of us. You got to update your resume. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. But I think this will be the team that could possibly save his job. It's all about them just executing and staying healthy enough, because we all know guys are going to get injured. Can they stay healthy enough and execute well enough for this team to be in position in January and possibly in February? That's going to do it for this episode, guys. I thank you as always for watching. Again, like, share, subscribe. Check us out on Apple Podcasts and also on Spotify. Another episode will be coming back very quickly, probably right after this one. By the time you see this one, it loads up. That one will be on a different topic, be on NFL training camp or possibly Team USA. We'll see where it goes. But as always, guys, take care. Thank you for watching. Be safe, be blessed, and have a good one.